Are we ready, Manda?
Hello.
Hello. All
Hi,
right,
David.
Manda. Very good. Yes. Hello. Welcome, everybody. Manda, are we ready to record?
We're
Very
recording.
good. Fantastic. Well, I am very pleased to welcome everybody to our last roundtable of the conference, the Mexico Roundtable. And for this one, we have a very special slate of speakers, which included an ambassador, a noted scholar of migrant diplomacy, and an on-the-ground migrant advocate. So let us now turn to this panel. Our first speaker is Ambassador Reina Torres Mendeville, who is the Consul General of Mexico and the Dean of the Chicago Consular Corps. During her diplomatic career, Ambassador Torres Mendeville has held various positions in the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs, including General Director for Latin America and the Caribbean, Deputy General Director for International Policy on Human Rights, and Deputy Chief of Staff to the Secretary of Foreign Relations. She was Deputy Chief of Mission in the Mexican Embassy in the Czech Republic and political liaison in the Embassy of Mexico in the United States. Ambassador Torres Mendeville also served as General Director for Protection of Mexicans Abroad. Before her current position in Chicago, she served as Consul General in San Antonio, Texas. Ambassador Torres Mendeville was a resident fellow at Harvard University's Weatherhead Center for International Affairs and participated in the Hemispheric Security Program at the Inter-American Defense College in Washington, D.C. She graduated from Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México and holds a master's degree in international relations from the London School of Economics. I'd like very much to welcome Ambassador Torres Mendeville. Welcome to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, David. I am really happy to be part of this panel. Of course, the questions that you pose to the panelists are very challenging. So I'm going to try to synthesize many things that I would like to say about the main topic for discussion. You mentioned in the questions, in the work that we did to prepare this panel, your interest in the panelists to comment about what roles plays migration in shaping perhaps diplomacy and foreign policy, among other things. I would like to start by saying that the Mexican experience is quite unique in this regard for many reasons, but the most obvious reason is the proximity we have with the United States. We're tied by geography. You know that the United States, and it's been discussed in the previous panels, is one of the main countries that attracts migration. Historically, that's a reality. And it turns out that we have in this country close to 35 million persons of Mexican roots, of Mexican origin. Out of those 35, 11 million are people born in Mexico. Mexican citizens, and out of those, 5 million is calculated are undocumented in an irregular status. So this big reality that we have with the United States, not only the intensity of our exchanges, trade, and exchanges in academic institutions, universities, culture, so many other things tie our two countries together. But what is most importantly is now more than in any time in our history, we're tied by the relationships among people. You know, we have over 35 million persons that have connections with Mexico. So that brings this reality to a different level. So we can talk about, public diplomacy and other ways in which we conduct diplomacy out of, what is talked about in capitals or capital to capital. Now, what brings life to this relationship undoubtedly is the ties among those 35 million persons. And let me tell you, with a recent reform that we had in our constitution, now that figure can grow because now people of second or third generation can recuperate their Mexican nationality through a new process that we have at the consulates. So we're calculating that those 35 million persons with Mexican roots can grow quite rapidly if people access this process in the consulates to recuperate their Mexican nationality. So what these 35 million persons, the presence, the reality that we face in our bilateral relationship has shaped actually the way in which we conduct diplomacy with the United States. No other country in the world has the consulate network that Mexico has in the United States. Currently, we have 53 consulates in the US. Out of those 53 consulates, just to give you an example, 10 are in California, 11 in Texas, 5 in the Midwest. And it happens, the distribution, the geographic distribution is, of course, aligned with demography. Where is our community? And let me tell you a very brief story. The first consulate that we opened in the US was New Orleans, centuries ago. And it had to do with trade, of course. That was the way in which the world was shaped those years. With the pass of time, at some point in the 90s, we decided that it was not relevant anymore to have that consulate there because the Mexican population had moved to other places. But right after Katrina, we decided to reopen that consulate for a very simple reason. All the workers that, went to help rebuild New Orleans after that horrible natural tragedy were Mexicans. So now we have, again, a consulate in New Orleans, and it was a direct response on, how the workers moved from several states to New Orleans at that time. So that kind of synthesized how we are reacting constantly to the way our diaspora is behaving in the United States. And that has helped us to develop not only the largest consular network in the world, but something that is quite unique to Mexican diplomacy, which is the consular diplomacy. And what we do in consular diplomacy are two things, basically. On the one hand, of course, all the services that we traditionally and all the countries traditionally provide to their citizens in a different country. That is related to identity, like passports, consular ID, civil registry, public notary, and all those things. And but also, we have created other things beyond that. For example, how did the Mexican government reacted in the 90s when Proposition 187 came out in California, trying to deny services to undocumented migrants? Well, it was very simple. We created the Ventanillas de Salud, or health booths, in the consulates. Every consulate has a partnership with a local organization to provide services, health services, to our population in everywhere where there is a consulate. That's something very unique that we do, and that is part of the DNA of the consulates. And that was the beginning. So now, for example, here in Chicago, we have a health booth in a partnership with Alivio Medical Center, but we also have a financial literacy booth in partnership with the Resurrection Project, and we also have an education booth. So we try not only to provide services to the community, but to empower our community to make sure that they are able to exercise their rights. And a very important part of that operation is protection. We also have legal services for our community. And the idea is not only that they can come to the consulate in a situation of crisis, but also to make sure that we provide services when their rights are violated. The context here in the Midwest, particularly in Illinois, is different, but can you imagine how this happened or the need of these services in other states that are not sanctuary states or sanctuary cities? But most importantly, we do a lot of information to prevent our communities to get engaged in situations that could affect their migratory status. And we have actually two beautiful programs that are not only a paradigm in international protection of the rights of foreign citizens in another country, but also an extraordinary example of how developed and sophisticated is this operation that we have in the US. One is the program to prevent Mexican nationals to be sentenced to death penalty in the US. That is an extremely successful program. In the last 20 years, we have been implementing this one. It's extremely rare that we have cases in which a Mexican national is sentenced to death penalty because we find at the beginning of the process is mitigating elements. So we don't intervene in the decision of the judges regarding the culpability of one person, but we just make sure that since Mexico doesn't have death penalty, Mexican citizens would not receive this sentence in a foreign country. And the other program that is more recent and actually is close to our hearts here in Chicago is a program to review cases of people that have been incarcerated, and then there is doubt about their guilt, that they were procedural elements or other elements that could have put them in a situation where they received very long convictions without being actually guilty. It's some sort of innocence project. We have partnered with Notre Dame University to do that. And we have now this kind of innocence project or clinic to review these cases. Just recently, somebody from Indianapolis was freed after more than 10 years, almost 20 years, spending his life in prison when it was proved to be innocent. So these are examples of this side, of what consular diplomacy is. And just to synthesize, because I know that I have limited time, the other part, of course, has to do with all those actions that we do, not only to create conditions for us to empower our community, but also to advance our national interest in the local level. If we talk about specific project that we have of infrastructure in Mexico, and we want to encourage companies to go invest in this one, the consulates are a wonderful tool to do that. Many our friends from Canada, for example, have told me that they are envious of the capabilities that the Mexican government has to speak about these particular things in all the U.S. territory. So this other part, will bring us together and working really closely with local authorities, with federal offices that have representation in different regions, but also with other actors, many actors that are not only organizations of the Mexican or Mexican-American community, but also churches, chambers of commerce, and cultural organizations. So it's some sort of public diplomacy, but with a consular footprint. And that, as I said, is unique. We have developed this very sophisticated infrastructure, institutional infrastructure, precisely to catch up with the reality of a very intense relationship with the US and the way in which our communities here behave to fulfill the needs or the services that they require from the Mexican government. And I have to say, we have developed a very dynamic and sophisticated operation here. That's our response precisely to this very intense phenomenon, the phenomenon of migration to the United States. So I'm going to stop here, David, just to make sure that I don't take more time that needed.
Reina, thank you so very much for your observations. I think that what you're talking about exemplifies so many of the beautiful things that consuls general do in our city, and it's just it really brings home the granular nature of diplomacy, and that I think that too many people, when they associate the term state-sponsored diplomacy, they think about only acts between nation states, and for some of our students who might not be as familiar with the work of the consuls general here in Chicago, I think yours is a perfect example of this very intimate relationship that consuls general cultivate and have. And as you noted, I mean, it's just remarkable the amount of consulates that Mexico has here in the United States. And we are so very pleased to be able to partner with you and to be here today to learn more about that network. So thank you so very much for getting this panel started. And at this point in time, I want to introduce our second speaker, Antonio Alejo of the University of Granada. And Antonio is a professor in the Department of Political Science and Administration of the Faculty of Political Science and Sociology at the University of Granada. He's completed postdoctoral stays at the Center for Interdisciplinary Research in Sciences and Humanities of the UNAM and at the International Institute of Social Studies of the Erasmus University in Rotterdam, based in The Hague. His research agenda is focused on the transformations of contemporary diplomacy beyond state-centric perspectives, with an interdisciplinary dialogue between global studies, critical diplomatic studies, and nomadic thought. Antonio has published in journals such as the Hague Journal of Diplomacy, International Studies in Sociology of Education, Education, Citizenship, and Social Justice, Migration Letters, Migraciones, Colombia International, Latin America Policy, Politics and Policy, and CIDOB, d'Affaires Internationales. And I should also say that Antonio is such a great friend of the Gray School, and we value so much his scholarship. One of his articles on migrant diplomacy is a regularly assigned reading for our students. And so I know it's a great pleasure for our students to get to hear from you directly today, Antonio. And so the floor is yours.
Thank you, David. Do you hear me well? Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, great. I prepared something, so I'm going to read. I think it's better for me. So I start. Hello, everyone. I thank David, Jeffrey, and the school team for having me on this panel dedicated to the case of Mexico and foreign migration. It's an honor to share this panel with the Ambassador Reina Torres and Jenny Cornejo. Today, my presentation aims to offer substantial evidence to rethink the relation between diplomacies and societies beyond contemporary state-centric perspectives and sedentary mentalities. Alex Sager says, walls are insignificant compared to the mental barriers that separate us from our neighbors. Following this remarkable idea of Sager, I consider it necessary to rethink diplomacy as a political tool to negotiate and represent human relations when people in motion face hostile environments in the name of national interest, patriotism, and sovereignty. This presentation will try to give an answer to one of the three questions that orient the conference. How can diplomacy help us to rethink the role of mobility, migration, displacement, and economies in the present context? In order to respond to this question, I focus on the new American diaspora as expression of foreign migration and the resettlement processes in Mexico. Where's the new American diaspora? Historically, the United States has deported non-citizens back to their countries of origin, and little attention has been paid to know what happens in these post-deportation lives. However, the experiences of the poor people from the United States are acknowledged by scholars and recognize them as the new American diaspora. To think about the new American diaspora, I focus in the internal removals. Here I am not referring to border detentions. I understand deportation as Goldratt Bouza defines removal, I open quote, the compulsory and confirmed movement of an inadmissible or deportable alien out of the United States based on the order of removal, I close quote. The land estimates 2,600,000 return flows, forced voluntary, between 2005 and 2015 from the United States to Mexico. From them, over 500,000 are youths between the age of 18 and 35. To identify these deportees as the new American diaspora, I followed Caldwell, asking, what happens when people are rejected and expelled by the country they consider their home? According to Caldwell, approximately 1/3 of the people deported to Mexico consider the US their home. For this author, deported people with long-term ties to the United States are functional Americans by socialization. In many speeches about the Dreamers, the former President Obama mentioned them as American in every way except for their papers. So, defining the American deportees' moves into Mexico is not precise as a return migration. Anderson says, the term return migration is based on a geographical and disciplinary model for understanding human mobility and one that can be obscure more than clarify the experience of what must also be referred to as the new US American diaspora. Following these arguments, the Puerto American life experiences mean to challenge the traditional notion of what it means to be Americans and contest white hegemonic constructions of what it means to be American. Thus, the new American diaspora compels to rethink different ways of defining membership and even citizenship in the United States and highlights the contradiction of banishing people who feel like they belong within the United States territorial boundaries. For some scholars, these departed people live in exile from their futures and families. Support activism in Mexico affirms that migrants face situations of discrimination, racism, and violation of human rights, so Mexican resettlement processes have not been friendly. Then, there is often a hostile sociocultural environment for the poor people in Mexico. The poor people's activism in Mexico promotes a dignified life after the traumatic deportation process. With this motivation to mobilize these people in motion activism, help the poor people who have not lived in Mexico for many years or have never been there. The community of the poor people in Mexico has spent much of their lives in the United States. Now they are in Mexico by force. According to their narrative, they do not see Mexico as home. They feel that they live in a foreign country. They do not have a sense of belonging with this country, its society, and its culture. For them, their home is the land where they grew up or were born. Returning to the question that oriented these presentations, I turn to the professional diplomacy perspective. In this academic way, I follow the critical and reflective intellectual trajectory set out by scholars who are thinking about the multiplicities and pluralities of diplomatic practices, actors, and spaces both in the past and contemporary world. In line with this theoretical approach, it is possible to think beyond dominant narratives that relate diplomacy with the nation-state external activities as a natural condition. Beyond migration diplomacy or consular diplomacy oriented to diasporas welcoming sending states interaction, I focus on people in motion as co-producers of translocal communities and civic binationalities as post-national identities. Hence, it is not accurate to identify the people in motion moves linearly, leaving one nation state and arriving in another. So, identify the deported people, construct dynamic and hybrid cultures as products of their life story defined by mobility. The poor people express that they will try to go back to the United States, particularly those who have American citizenship. For them, their lives in motion do not conclude with the resettlement in Mexico. With this in mind, migrant organizations promote and defend the other experiences and the abilities migrants have acquired in their lives through the deported people mobilizations. I found that the new American diaspora promotes a post-national understanding of North America. In this sense, these organizations develop strategies to defend migrants' rights and help them to maintain link with their families and communities in the United States. They also promote a post-national sense of belonging with the narrative they are from here and there. With this self-positioning, these poor people identify a translocal culture not as a hindrance but an asset to dignify their lives in motion. In this sense, the post-national communities see themselves with the capacity to transform the forced migration or the poor narratives and offers a perspective to be part of two localities simultaneously. So, as we observe in these state-centric mentalities, under sedentary assumptions, migration is reduced to movement from one fixed point, sending country, to another, receiving country. As a result, attention is focused on admission to a political community, rather than the journey itself and its role in the large context of individuals' lives. People are treated either as citizens or foreigners, compatriots or strangers, ignoring the complexities of identity and the diverse ways in which place and space shape us. With these complex dynamics that the poor people are developing in Mexico and other places worldwide, how do we understand the notion of contemporary diplomacy? Following Bertrand Badi, I understand that transnational diplomacy is an opportunity to deepen the notion of the social appropriation of diplomacy to encourage inclusive societies. Since the early 21st century, the study of diplomacy has extended terms of processes and dynamics through diverse geographical areas and issues. In the current application of diplomacy, it is recognized that it is under pressure to involve a social and inclusive dimension in the decision-making process on foreign policies and global agendas. The challenge associated with multidimensional global inequalities make it necessary to consider how ordinary citizens participate in increasingly complex and interdependent societies. To reflect this idea, it is necessary to recognize that the states are not well equipped to face the challenge of global dynamics. this presentation offers a critical message. Club and elitist diplomacy models are inadequate to address current global challenges and societal pressures. So, it is essential to recognize that the involvement of ordinary citizens in diplomacy is an innovative contribution to contemporary diplomacy. Still, it is not easy to organize their inclusion and participation. The arguments present on diplomacy, for migration, and the poor people call us to the necessity to recognize how diplomatic infrastructures have been transformed from closed circuits into open spaces. So, the arguments offered call on us to reconsider diplomacy related to social function of diplomacy and the importance of thinking of it as a co-working space where collaborative thinking is fostered. These arguments are pertinent if we distinguish that global order requires an effective inclusion of ordinary citizens to address the everyday globalization dynamics that affect people's daily lives worldwide. As an easy political process, inclusive diplomacy is an evolving incomplete and shows a new set of inclusive conditions that make the traditional understanding of diplomacy pretty obsolete. However, the challenge of inclusion mentioned above should be visible in the everyday practice of diplomats and require the additions of the new functional qualities to the diplomatic performance, including strong skills for interacting with ordinary citizens and involving non-state actors in the decision-making process. To close these presentations, I invite to the audience to extend their understanding and thinking around diplomacy beyond the rational calculation of winning and losing strategies employed by the realistic perspectives seen in global politics or through governance approaches. Diplomacy practices by people in ocean can be put in practice for the encounters between cultures and people, recognizing the others as part of a post-national thinking everyday life. However, I have made clear that contemporary inclusive diplomacy as a nascent process is an evolving and incomplete set of rules that still makes official representatives of government over states, even scholars, very uncomfortable. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Antonio. I really like your discussion of inclusive diplomacies, and I think that in so many respects that really embodies the transprofessional approach that our school takes. And there are so many of these ideas that I think are just so fruitful and worthy of deeper mining. So thank you so very much. Before we turn to our final panelists, I just want to remind the audience that we welcome and invite and encourage your questions. And we would love you to post some through our Q&A portal, which you will find at the bottom of your screen. And looking over our guests right now, I know there's a number of people who I am certain could contribute to this conversation, and I look forward to hearing from you. So I want to turn now to our final speaker. And before I do so, I want to say that I regret that Jose Pablo Martinez, who was scheduled to be with us today, due to unforeseen circumstances, could not. And we have a remarkable speaker who has very kindly chosen to take his place, Jenny Cornejo. And Jenny only was informed a couple of hours ago of the invitation to join us. So I think she deserves special commendation, and her story is remarkable and her insights are so valuable. So we are so grateful to have her here with us today. So let me tell you a little bit about Jenny. Jenny Cornejo was born in Guatemala. Her family later moved to Mexico, from where they migrated to the United States. Since Jenny was 17, she has been involved in migration community groups, assisting with translation services and efforts to help migrants transition to the United States. One of the first organizations she joined was Latinos Unidos in Northern Virginia. In 2007, she partnered with Unidad Latina en Acción, and she is now a community organizer in CEDES, the Centro de Educación y Formación para el Desarrollo Social. This is an organization in Mexico City that advocates for and is led by migrants. And it's actually an organization that I'm familiar with through the writings of Antonio Alejo, who is with us today. CEDES was founded by migrants who have returned to Mexico City from the United States in response to the tension and vulnerability of human mobility. And so at this time, I'm very pleased to welcome Jenny Cornejo. And Jenny, you now have the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry if I'm a little bit nervous, but like you said, I was just informed of the panel today. It is a great honor to speak on behalf of my people. I consider all Latinos my people. We deal with different kinds of immigration. For a long time, Mexico only saw the immigration related to family and being making money, being wealthy, in order to bring home the money, being able to come to the States for some time and then go back to Mexico and build your home. What we are facing right now is something completely different. What we are facing now is a lot of Mexican people are being driven out of their communities because of what's going on with the warfare in Mexico within their gangs. That is not something that the people is protected from. And you now have a lot of families that are traveling to the United States seeking refugee because now it's not hunger that is pushing them away or levels of comfort. What is pushing them away is they are being killed. Now they are forced to pay for living in their communities, not to just the government within taxes and all of their fees, but now they also have to pay for the right to live within their communities. So immigration is going to be changing a lot in the following years. What we have experienced in CEDES, we are actually helping children that were born in here. They are American citizens. When their parents are forced to go back to Mexico, when their parents get deported, and the children cannot stay in the States by themselves, these children are forced to go back to Mexico, a place that they are not familiar with. Some of our children don't even speak Spanish. Mind it that child, when he turns 18, he has the right to come back to America or to the United States. Now, the problem that we're going to be facing is that they don't have the education that a normal 18-year-old American citizen would have. They are coming back to the States, but they're very limited. One of the things that I support CEDES with is translating the birth certificates of those American citizens, American children. The certificate has to be translated. It must be, it's called apostille, and then it would, so it becomes a legal document in Mexico for these children to be able to claim dual citizenship in Mexico and being able to study under the Mexican free law of study. Otherwise, those children are considered not Mexican, and they have to pay for their education. Now, imagine if you have a family of 5 children, you get to Mexico because you've been deported, and they tell you that the translation and all of the documents that you must have in order for your child are going to cost you between $150 and $200 per child. What's going to happen? Now those children are not eligible to go to school, sometimes for a year or more. So that is what the reality that our own children are living. So immigration is not just from Mexico or from Guatemala. Now we are also experiencing immigration from the United States to those countries, but they are being forced. It's not that they want to go, they are being forced. And unfortunately, right now, that is the way that we are handling things. We are, as a community, we are trying to do the best that we can, offering those children classes in Spanish, ESL. Now ESL is being integrated backwards because now they are forced to speak Spanish. So I don't, the way that we normally help in CEDES, we translate the birth certificates. We make sure that when the children are ready to come back, we look for options on where is that child coming back to, because that child is not traveling back to the United States with family. Sometimes they are, but most of the time they're not. So this is an American-born citizen that is trying to be integrated to American life when they were basically disrooted That's what we're doing. We're disrooting a lot of people from where they should be. So immigration is definitely something that is going to keep us awake many nights. And as a human being, I would like to help as much as I can, but I do understand that it's our governments, the ones that have to start implementing more rules. They're gonna have to start implementing more avenues for the people to stay within their communities. Right now, the immigration that is being forced from Mexico, the majority is because they are driven out because of drug lords. So it's not because they don't have the means to survive. It's just that they are being prevented from life. If they don't move, if they don't follow what they're supposed to do, the whole family will perish. Now, this is something that a few years ago, we would not even think of Mexico having this issue. I myself in 1989 came to the States because my own country was going through a civil war, because we were facing all of that, because they were killing us, not because we were just leaving our country because we wanted to. Our countries are beautiful. Our countries just need a little bit of help so that our people can be strong. And sorry, I get emotional, but we need a voice. We are all humans in the end of the day, and we all need to help each other. We can only do that with other people, governments listening to us, and with the power of God. That's what we ride on. I am so sorry I don't have that much to tell you anymore. SEDES is always there. We are able to help, like I said, the children that need to come back to the United States. And we also help them within their travel when they're going back with their parents to make things easier for them, because we know that the economy is just not there to support the things that they need.
And I want to thank you so much for such a comprehensive reflection and such a thoughtful one. And as I said, you'll get special commendations for having only found out you were going to do this so recently. So thank you again so much. What a wonderful panel, and so many different dimensions of our subject have been brought to the fore by your three observations.